In this issue of ABC's Wide World of Flying, Bill Cox will give you a left seat checkout in Piper's high-flying cabin class Malibu. You'll visit a high-altitude mountain airport with Barry Schiff to compare book figures with actual performance in 3 different types of airplanes. You'll have the opportunity to fly with 3 top-of-the-line Lorans and check out the amazing features of these cockpit computers. You'll get to fly in one of the few remaining B-17s, and you'll meet some of the courageous men who flew them in World War II. And finally, you'll see what it's like to fly the hot new Lancair, one of today's best-selling home builds. All this and more in this issue of ABC's Wide World of Flying.
Welcome to the premiere edition of ABC's Wide World of Flying. This is a video magazine designed for pilots and aviation enthusiasts. Each issue will take you places and show you things as only video can do. Now, we have 2 important goals with each issue of our quarterly video magazine. The first is to let you meet the people and fly the planes from a broad spectrum of aviation. Second, we'd like to give you the insight and knowledge to make you a safer and better pilot. Now, to that end, I have an exciting announcement to make. The Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association, AOPA, and Wide World of Flying have signed a mutual cooperation agreement in the areas of technical advice, editorial coverage, and marketing. Each issue of Wide World of Flying will contain a special AOPA feature. And in addition, we've added a section at the end of our tape to allow manufacturers to show you new products and services. It's called the Wide World of Flying Bonus Buyer's Guide, and you'll find it as a feature at the end of this tape. But that's enough here on the ground. Let's clear the props and get going.
It's called the Piper Malibu, and it's the best-selling single-engine piston airplane in the world. Surprisingly, it's also the most expensive single available. In 1986, in the middle of the worst recession in general aviation history, Piper sold almost 100 Malibus worth about $40 million. Welcome to ABC's Wide World of Flying. I'm Bill Cox, and we're here on Mojave Airport in California's high desert to investigate the mystique of the Malibu. Right up front, the airplane's primary attraction is simply that it's the fastest, most comfortable production single on the market. Cruise and climb are impressive, range is the best of any stock single, and this airplane can fly high above the weather. Part of the reason for the Malibu's success is that it's the first totally new airplane since the Ted Smith Aerostar designed to do one job only: fly high, fast, and comfortable. The Malibu design is pretty much an original. The wing has an unusually long 43-foot span, try fitting that into your T-hanger, and a short chord, resulting in an 11-to-1 aspect ratio. This makes the Malibu almost ideal for high-altitude flight, and also produces a glide ratio of nearly 12-to-1. That means a Malibu at 21,000 feet AGL could glide power off 50 miles in any direction. Taking a lesson from Boeing, Piper's design team placed the tail as close as possible to the passenger cabin to reduce unnecessary weight, wetted area, and drag. Wing and fuselage skins are of thick 32 thousandths aluminum to minimize surface deformation at high speeds. The Malibu's engine is a 310 horsepower version of the Continental TSIO 520, designed specifically for the airplane. It's a variation on a geared 435 horse power plant that's been derated to only 310 horsepower for reliability. And for that reason, the initial TBO was set by Continental at 2,000 hours. The engine utilizes dual turbochargers, one on the left and one on the right, and intercoolers to boost critical altitude to 20,000 feet and maximum 75% height to 25,000 feet. Everywhere you look, there's virtually nothing left hanging out to grab the wind. In short, this is an aerodynamically squeaky clean airplane. Perhaps the airplane's greatest asset, though, is its cabin class comfort. The interior has dimensions similar to those of the Piper Navajo twin. The environmental control systems keep everyone breathing warm, oxygen-rich air at any altitude. In short, the Malibu is about as close as you can come to a miniature six-place airliner. And that analogy certainly carries through to the front office. In many respects, the Malibu is as sophisticated as many airline jets, but without the complexity of extra engines. A typically equipped Malibu features backup systems for both vacuum and electrical power, de-icing, a flight director, navigation capability that often includes Lorans C, glide slope and HSI, and storm scope. All features normally reserved for more expensive multi-engine piston and turbine aircraft. One of the Malibu's most impressive features is its pressurization system. With a maximum differential of 5.5 pounds, the Big Piper can maintain an 8,000-foot cabin at 25,000 feet. There's little reason not to fly high on virtually every flight. And that's exactly what we're going to do today. Come along with us now as we take this Malibu up into its element high above the earth. At 4,100 pounds gross weight, the Malibu doesn't exactly scamper down the runway. The airplane has to catch its breath and accelerate to 110 knots before it begins to climb with the enthusiasm you might expect from a $440,000 machine. One of the great joys of pressurization is that you can dispense with oxygen masks. As you can see, we're now climbing through 13,000 feet at 1,200 feet per minute, but the cabin is only approaching 4,000 feet, and the cabin rate of climb is barely 1,000 feet per minute. You might also notice that we're showing a fuel flow of just over 35 gallons per hour in climb. But climb is so quick in the Malibu, you're not at that high burn rate very long. Our altitude is above 15,000 feet now, and we've joined up with our camera ship, a Cessna Turbo 210. To emphasize the advantages of pressurization, take a look at the pilot and cameraman in our camera ship. For my money, there's never been a comfortable oxygen mask made, but that's one of the advantages of pressurization.
Los Angeles Center, Malibu 9113 X-ray is flight level 250.
Malibu 113 X-ray, roger.
Well, right now we're about 25,000 feet above the sea, and off to our right, you can look down and see Mount Whitney, the tallest mountain in the 48 states. The cabin's pressurized to 8,000 feet up here at 25,000, so everyone's breathing comfortably. Also, as you can see, I've leaned the engine to 50 degrees on the lean side of peak, and we're burning about 16 gallons an hour while we're cruising along at 216 knots. That makes this one of the most efficient airplanes around, despite the fact that it has 310 horsepower out front. Specific fuel consumption on the Malibu is about 0.41 pounds per horsepower per hour. The reason for this is that you can lean the Malibu's engine to 50 degrees on the lean side of peak, and that's because the fuel distribution all cylinders is unusually even. That's the reason this airplane's capable of getting such unusual economy, 16 gallons an hour with this much horsepower. With a full 122 gallons of fuel in the tanks and this much speed, we could probably go all the way from here to Houston, Texas if we had full tanks. Pull back to 65%, we could even go on to New Orleans.
Because the Malibu's airfoils were designed specifically for high-altitude operation, the airplane retained surprising control harmony. The ailerons remain quick and light but not touchy. Elevator and rudder response are similarly friendly, without the delayed reaction you often experience in models that have been adapted for tall altitudes rather than designed for them. The Malibu is equally docile in the pattern. Gear and flaps go down with minimum pitch change, approaches work fine at any speed above about 80 knots, and the airplane tries to make you look good rather than trying to embarrass you. Here's a pilot who's been looking good in the first production Malibu since 1984, Larry Grant.
As I've flown the Malibu over these last 3 years, every number in the spec book has been coming up and maintaining those numbers. I still average 216 knots with a fuel burn of 16 gallons per hour at 25,000 feet. And I take that altitude many, many times. If the flight's over an hour, I fly to 25,000 feet.
As the ultimate single-engine airplane, the Malibu compares in both comfort and performance with many corporate twins. Yet, the Big Piper doesn't cost nearly as much to operate. Its redundant systems, weather-topping turbocharger, and pressurization make it an eminently usable machine for regular high-altitude trips, cruising in smooth air and sunshine above all the meteorological misery. Malibus aren't cheap. In fact, by the time you see this, Piper may have built its first $500,000 single-engine airplane. The Malibu appeals to the buyer who could afford a corporate jet, but prefers to do his own flying.
Maximum allowable speed in an airport traffic area is 142 knots, 156 knots, or 180 knots. The correct answer is 156 knots.
Hi, I'm Barry Schiff, and this is the Big Bear City Airport, situated high in the mountains of Southern California. The airport elevation here is almost 7,000 feet above sea level, and when the summer temperature gets up to 90 degrees or more, the density altitude here can be well over 10,000 feet above sea level. A takeoff plan is essential. Every pilot knows that a situation like this calls for careful consultation with the pilot's operating handbook. The chart shows how to determine takeoff distance based on wind, aircraft gross weight, pressure altitude, and outside air temperature. Most handbooks specify using a short field procedure. This might include, for example, using a specific flap setting and using maximum available power prior to brake release. Most charts also show different liftoff speeds for when operating at less than maximum allowable gross weight. These charts are extremely valuable, but the big question is, how well do they relate to the airplane you fly and to your piloting techniques? Well, we've brought 3 airplanes up here today to compare book figures with some real-world performance. The first aircraft is a stiff-legged 1979 Cessna 172. It's got a 160 horsepower engine and a fixed-pitch propeller. We've got a 1967 Beechcraft V-35B Bonanza, 285 horsepower, normally aspirated with a constant speed propeller. And finally, we have a 1981 Cessna Turbo 210. Its engine is rated for 310 horsepower for 5 minutes, and 285 horsepower maximum continuous. It too has a constant speed propeller. Today, the reported wind, which is measured at the top of a tall building, is from 230 degrees at 15 knots. But the wind at ground level is only 5 knots. The temperature right now is 82 degrees, and the pressure altitude is 6,700 feet, which gives us a density altitude of 9,644 feet. Big Bear's runway is 5,850 feet long. It's fully paved and it's level. So let's get started. We're using sandbags to bring the weight of each airplane right up to maximum allowable gross. For this Cessna 172, that's 2,400 pounds.
You all ready, Barry?
Great, thanks a lot. Using the pilot's operating handbook, I've calculated that the required takeoff distance should be 1,815 feet. I'll be using a liftoff speed of 51 knots, as specified in the handbook for this gross weight. We've positioned an assistant with an orange flag at the calculated liftoff point, and we have another spotter with a white flag to help determine my actual liftoff point, just in case more than the calculated distance is required. The operating handbook calls for 10 degrees of flaps for a short field takeoff. After completing my checklist, I adjust the mixture at full throttle for maximum RPM. This provides maximum takeoff power.
Big Bear traffic, Cessna 62905 Delta taxiing on the runway 7, right close traffic.
Good short field technique requires that you develop full power before brake release. Run the throttle in smoothly, double check the engine gauges, and release the brakes. This airplane is pretty anemic at this density, altitude, and weight. It's a lot different than my sea level takeoff from Santa Monica this morning, but I wait patiently for the airspeed to build. And I wait. And I wait. And finally, the airspeed reaches 51 knots, liftoff speed. As I'm coming back, I know I went past the orange flag. That was really no surprise. But just how much longer was my takeoff roll than the book predicted? That's the question we came to answer.
Barry, your takeoff roll was about 2,200 feet.
That's interesting. According to the book, the takeoff distance should have been 1,815 feet, but in reality it was 2,200 feet long. That's an increase of about 22%. Let's take a look at a few of the possible reasons for this. This engine has quite a bit of time on it, so it probably doesn't deliver as much power as when it was new. There are several nicks on the leading edge of the propeller, so it probably doesn't develop as much thrust as when it was new. There's some hanger rash on the leading edge of the wings, and who knows, this airplane probably has less than ideal rigging. Maybe the airspeed indicator is out of calibration, and my actual liftoff speed was higher than indicated. And perhaps my technique is less than the perfect polish of those test pilots who are trying to get the best performance possible for their factory marketing people. How did the Bonanza and the Turbo 210 do, you may be thinking? Well, I'll tell you. Never assume that flaps are always to be used for a short field takeoff, because according to the Pilot's Operating Handbook for this Bonanza, flaps are not to be used for a short field takeoff, so always follow the book. And when this airplane weighs 3,400 pounds, which is the maximum allowable gross weight, the recommended liftoff speed is 71 knots. I calculated that the takeoff roll for this Bonanza should be 2,250 feet, but in actual testing today, the best I could do was 2,750 feet. That's 500 feet longer than the book figure. And the Turbo 210 also failed to match book performance. With a maximum allowable gross weight of 4,000 pounds, the suggested liftoff speed is 72 knots. According to the chart, this airplane should be able to take off in 2,140 feet, but our best run was 2,400 feet. That's 260 feet longer than the book figure, or about 12% more. The lesson here should be a clear one. Don't count on book figures. Find out what your airplane really can do, and don't believe that if your performance is close to book at low density altitude, that you can automatically count on the same thing at high density altitude. Up here, little errors can add up to big differences in takeoff roll and initial climb rate. That's why we came here for this demonstration. And what about your takeoff technique in a high density altitude situation? Have you ever committed one of these common mistakes? Many pilots use the temperature given by ATIS or Unicom in their takeoff calculations. Do you? The problem is, the reported temperature is measured in the shade, and performance charts specify that we use ambient temperature. That's the temperature right out here in the open, near the runway. On a hot sunny day, ambient temperature can be 20 degrees or more than the reported temperature. And that 20-degree temperature difference has the effect of elevating the density altitude by 1,200 feet, and that can substantially increase the takeoff distance required. Another common problem is caused by low tire pressure. Underinflated tires have much higher rolling resistance and can add distance to your takeoff roll. Consider the runway. Does it slope uphill? Is it gravel, dirt, or grass? These factors can add significant distance to your takeoff roll. Are your flaps set correctly? Follow the advice in the Pilot's Operating Handbook. Too much or too little flap extension can dramatically affect performance. Are you using all the runway? As the old saying goes, there's nothing as useless as the runway behind you. And are you holding the brakes until your engine is developing maximum power? You can be sure the test pilot at the factory did. And perhaps most critical, are you rotating precisely at the specified liftoff speed? Not too early and not too late? During a critical takeoff, it's difficult to resist pulling back on the yoke as you approach the end of the runway, but that can be a fatal mistake. Here's what happens. When the airplane is lifted off too soon, it just mushes along in ground effect. It may be so far behind the power curve that it is impossible to accelerate enough to climb. At best, the takeoff will be excruciatingly long. If you're facing a really difficult takeoff situation, why not lighten the load? At high density altitudes, just 200 or 300 pounds can reduce your takeoff roll by almost 1,000 feet. If necessary, make a couple of short hops to a lower elevation airport and then continue from there. Or why not spend the night? Join the dawn patrol and enjoy the benefit of the cold morning air. Oh, one final tip. Why not practice what the airlines do? After all your takeoff distance calculations are complete, add 20% or even more. Every airline takeoff includes a large safety margin. Why shouldn't you? Good takeoff technique is no accident. It's good practice, knowing your airplane and knowing how to fly it.
Do you get full power on takeoff? Is your carb heat really off when you think it is? Here's a quick way to check the rigging of your engine controls. Let's begin with the throttle control. When you push the knob all the way in, there should be a cushion of clearance at least a 1/16 of an inch or more between the knob and the instrument panel. The cushion of panel clearance means that the throttle at the other end of the cable is, in fact, hitting the full open stop in the carburetor or fuel injection system. The engine is capable of developing full power. If the throttle has no clearance when pushed all the way in, it indicates that the throttle cable is probably not adjusted properly. And the result is that the engine throttle cannot open fully. The throttle knob is hitting the instrument panel before the throttle plate can hit its full open stop. That cushion of throttle clearance is important to ensure that your engine is capable of developing full power for takeoff. Let me show you a few other controls you should check for a cushion of panel clearance. On airplanes equipped with a constant speed prop, check the propeller governor control or you may not be getting maximum RPMs on takeoff. Check the mixture control. If there's no cushion of panel clearance, you may not be getting a full, rich mixture. On carbureted engines, check the carb heat control. If it has no panel clearance, the carb heat may never be fully off. If your engine has an alternate air door control, make sure it too has some panel clearance, or it may never fully close, which would let unfiltered air into your engine continuously. On twins, you'll be checking the clearance of the engine controls against the top of the pedestal instead of the panel, but the importance is the same. As a final quality test, always check your engine gauges immediately after applying full power on every takeoff roll. In an airplane with a fixed pitch prop such as this 172, you should be getting at least the minimum static RPM on the tachometer. In an airplane with a constant speed prop such as this Bonanza, you should see maximum RPM on the tach and the appropriate manifold pressure. These control rigging checks take only about 10 seconds, and usually the fix is just a cable adjustment by your mechanic.
You may recognize the computer behind me as the IBM PC, the most popular personal computer on the market. This, on the other hand, is the RNAV R30A Loran, one of the new generation of Lorans designed specifically for general aviation. In their own way, many Lorans have nearly the same computing power for navigation applications as the IBM. Today we're going to examine the R30A and several other models of Loran to see just how far this unusual navigation system has evolved.
A lake amphibian makes practically an ideal test bed for Loran C because water airplanes often fly to places that don't have radio nav aids. One of the most popular Lorans is the Apollo 2 installed in this Lake Renegade. All Loran systems have several readouts in common. On the Apollo, for example, using the West Coast chain, you can see we're tracking from Livermore here 25.7 nautical miles, 206-degree bearing, ground speed of 112 knots and a track of 70 degrees. The Loran typically keeps track of position with 2 fixes per second. You can see our position is changing at least twice a second here. By comparing the changes in those positions, the Apollo can calculate speed and heading information and determine its relative progress toward any other lat-long fix. For most pilots, the more common destinations are established airports. And tomorrow has you covered with a database they call the Flybrary, 2,500 pre-programmed airports and VORs that may be called up by punching a button or two or twisting a knob. Just for fun, we'll access the Flybrary by punching the mode button. You can see the Flybrary is divided into several regions. Southwest, the user mode, which is all of your individual waypoints. East Central, North Central. Here's the Northeast. We'll dial through the northeast waypoints, cursor through them. You can see they're divided up by the 3-letter identifiers of the individual airports and VORs. And in this case, we'll go to one you can recognize, Boston Logan Airport. It gives you the latitude and longitude of the waypoint. We can punch the 2 button. The Loran will think about it for a second. Then it will tell us that on a heading of 51 degrees, 2,291 nautical miles, we'll come to Boston Logan from our present position here on the west coast. As we land to wash off our little lake amphibian, here's where Loran can really come in handy. We've stored our present position for future reference as one of the Apollo's 100 waypoints. This will allow us to come back to this same spot anytime we wish.
With Loran, you're not bound by the line of sight limitation inherent in VHF. The Apollo 2 can define your position in latitude and longitude, even in the bottom of a lake canyon where we are today, or far over the horizon from the nearest stations.
If you need to put the airplane down right away, the Apollo 2 has a feature known as emergency search, which allows you basically to access the database. And in this case, you can see that the emergency search feature is telling us that Livermore is the nearest airport, 14 miles away, bearing of 198 degrees, and our speed toward Livermore is 126 knots. Just as with a VOR, the Apollo Loran has a CDI, in this case an electronic CDI, that tells us if we're off course left or right. In this instance, you can see the CDI is suggesting that we're off course to the left. And just as in a VOR, if the needle were to the right, you need to fly to the right. In this case, we need to fly to the right to be on course to Livermore, LVK. The Apollo 2 has a waypoint arrival mode that warns you within 1 nautical mile per 100 knots of airspeed of the airport. In this case, Livermore, and the arrival mode came on at almost exactly 1 nautical mile from the airport, so we're doing just about 100 knots.
The Apollo 2 Model 612 you've just seen in action sells for $3,295. But tomorrow does offer a complete line of Lorans for every budget, priced from about $1,300 to $6,000.
This Rockwell 114 may only be good for 1 water landing, but it's also fitted with a Loran C. This time one of the newest additions to the market, the North Star M1 from Digital Marine Electronics of Acton, Massachusetts. While the new North Star's primary claim to fame is its huge 14,000 waypoint database, consisting of some 6,500 public use airports and military bases, 1,150 VORs, and 6,400 NDBs and intersections, there's much more information about those waypoints available at the touch of a button. If, for example, the waypoint is an airport, we've dialed up here Palm Springs, in this case Papa Sierra Papa, and the North Star is showing us that at the heading to Palm Springs is 70 degrees, 78.3 nautical miles from our current location. Name of the airport is Palm Springs Municipal Airport. We'll go ahead and dial around to the various other information that's available. ATIS at Palm Springs is 118.25. You can also find out the approach frequency for Palm Springs, 126.7. Tower is 119.7. Ground control 121.9. Unicom 2295. The elevation at Palm Springs is 448 feet. Longest runway is runway 1230, 7,000 feet hard surfaced. And, of course, the airport latitude and longitude, in this case 33 degrees 49.6 minutes north by 116 degrees 30 minutes west. If we decide we want to go to a non-directional beacon, in this case we'll dial up Compton, California. Designator is Charlie Papa Mike. And the North Star M1 tells us that the heading to Compton is 304 degrees. The distance is 25.3 nautical miles. It's an NDB, and it tells us that the name of the beacon is Compton, California. Tells us the frequency, in case we want to dial it up on our ADF, is 378 kilohertz. And of course the latitude and longitude is always available, 33 degrees, 53 minutes north by 118 degrees, 15 minutes west. One of the irritating things about flying cross-country sometime, if you don't happen to know a specific airport name, especially when the airport is not named necessarily after the city, is that frequently it's hard to find information on the airport. Let's say, for example, you were going to Albuquerque, New Mexico. In this instance, all you need to know is that you want to go to Albuquerque, so you just simply dial up the designator of the city, and the North Star M1 will actually tell you everything else you need to know about that particular airport, from the name of the airport and the runway and every bit of information you could possibly ask for. In this case, we'll just dial up Albuquerque, ALB. The North Star immediately searches through its database and comes up with the fact that the name of the airport is Albuquerque International. Designator is Alpha Bravo, Quebec. And that from our current position here right off the coast at Los Angeles, it's 65 degrees, 588.7 nautical miles. The North Star M1 has a real-time clock that can operate in any time zone you wish to program for it. In this instance, since we're navigating to Albuquerque, New Mexico in the Mountain Time Zone, we can program the system to give us an estimated time en route and an estimated time of arrival in either the Mountain Time Zone or our local Pacific time, or in Greenwich time. We'll rotate down to setup mode. You can see that here on the West Coast, the time is coming up on 5:50. Over in Albuquerque, which is Mountain Time, Mountain Standard Time, the time is 6:50. And as you can see, across the ocean in Greenwich, England, Coordinated Universal Zulu Time is 1:50 in the morning. The system can tell us in any time zone we wish what our time of arrival is going to be. And one of the interesting features of the North Star M1 is that it has multiple leg flight planning capability. In this instance, we've programmed a round-robin flight right here in the Los Angeles basin from Long Beach, and about 6 different legs coming back to Long Beach. First leg is from Long Beach to Compton Airport, and there's a non-directional beacon located on Compton 378, and that's designated by the letter N for non-directional beacon. Long Beach is an airport designated by A for Alpha. In this case, the North Star is telling us that the heading to Compton from Long Beach is 298 degrees, 6.4 miles. The second leg of our round-robin trip is from Compton to Pomona VOR. Again, Compton designated by the N for NDB, and Pomona VOR designated with a V for VOR. 50 degrees, 25.6 nautical miles. Third leg from Pomona to Prado intersection, designated with an I for intersection. 165 degrees, 9.3 miles. The fourth leg from Prado intersection to Santa Ana VOR, once again designated with a V, 181 degrees, 15 miles. And finally back to Long Beach from Santa Ana VOR to Long Beach with an A for airport, 285 degrees and 16.5 nautical miles. It's fairly apparent that navigating with the North Star Loran is a lot easier than navigating with the real North Star, especially in daylight. Digital Marine will sell you this model of the M1 with the database for $39.95, or you can buy the model without the database for about $29.95.
If tomorrow's Apollo is the oldest and most popular, and the North Star M1 is the newest, RNAV's R30A certainly offers the greatest number of supplemental features. If you buy the full-blown model with every bell and whistle installed, you'll pay around $3,995 for the system. Let's look at what you can do with an R30A installed in this Cessna 210.
Extended range capability allows the R30A to navigate utilizing the skywave as opposed to the ground wave, which is the Loran's more normal mode of operation. To get into extended range, you just press the enter until you get over to the normal, and then go to clear, and that'll put you into extended range. That allows the R30A to operate as far as 1,000 miles from the nearest Lorans GRI chain. The R30A provides a winds aloft program which allows you to determine what your actual wind is at altitude. In this case, we have a true airspeed of 154 knots, heading of 35 degrees. We punch enter, and we can see that the wind is essentially out of the north at 13 knots. Comes in very handy if you're making a pilot report to a flight service station. The absolute range capability of the R30A allows you to determine at your current speed exactly how far you can go on the remaining fuel. In this case, we have a fuel burn of 15 gallons per hour, 50 gallons remaining in the tanks. We'll press enter and the range comes up at 480 nautical miles at the remaining fuel. And that's at approximately 9 miles per gallon. If you decide you want to put the airplane on the ground right now, whether it's an emergency in flight or you just like to know your relative position with reference to other airports, you can punch the emergency search mode. In this case, it'll tell you that Van Nuys Airport is the closest one on a heading of 125 degrees and 17 nautical miles. And we can flip it one to the right. Also tells you that the elevation is 799 feet. Longest runway is 8,000 feet. There are runway lights. The tower frequency is 119.3. ATIS is 118.45, and Van Nuys is an instrument airport. The R30A is programmed with the latitude and longitude of the boundaries of all the restricted and special use airspace in America. Essentially, restricted areas, warning areas, terminal control areas, and ARSAs. In this instance, we're coming up on the Burbank ARSA. We'll punch it in. It tells us that the Burbank ARSA is 13 miles away. If we wish to get permission to enter the ARSA, we can call it Burbank Approach in 120.4. Okay, you can also rotate the large knob one click to the right. You can see we're 7 minutes from Victor November Yankee, Van Nuys. And our minimum sector altitude is 6,200 feet. Minimum en route safe altitude is 8,500 feet. Along with the R30A's semi-area navigation capability, it also has VNAV capability. That essentially tells you when to start down from any given cruise altitude to your airport. In this case, we primed the VNAV with a cruise altitude of 4,500 feet. We're going to descend to an airport elevation of 2,000 feet at 500 feet per minute. When we come to the point where we should initiate our letdown, the display will begin to flash and tell us to begin descent. The R30A has a remote ranging capability. In this case, we've chosen, well, okay, you can see we've just got our warning to begin our descent from current altitude on down to Van Nuys. As I was saying, the R30A has a remote ranging capability that allows you to flight plan from one point to the other without affecting your current navigation. In this case, we've selected Van Nuys to Bangor, Maine for no particular reason, just for the fun of it, really. We'll punch the enter button, and as you can see, the bearing from our current position to Bangor is 45 degrees. Distance is 2,348 nautical miles, and we definitely don't have the range to make that.
Whether you choose an Apollo, North Star, RNAV system, or some other brand, Loran offers advantages that simply aren't available in VHF navigation. A good Loran can double as a VOR, ADF, DME, and area navigation system, all for a fraction of the collective cost of those items. Loran is no panacea for the problems of aircraft navigation, but for the aviator with a need for its considerable talents, it can be the best investment on the panel.
Bill Cox has just shown us the many features of today's modern Lorans. Now, here's an inexpensive wide world of flying tip to help you learn how to use a new Loran or program your present unit in the comfort of your home and increasing your safety in the skies. Now, I discovered this when I was upgrading from the Model 612B that Bill demonstrated to their new 604 model with many extra features I wasn't familiar with. Simply remove the Loran, usually one screw does it, from the tray on your instrument panel. Determine what kind of plug it uses on the back end. You can usually purchase this plug at an electronic or computer store for under $5. Mate that plug to a 12-volt power supply. Now, most Lorans operate from 6 to 48 volts, but a 12-volt supply is the easiest to find. This one was just under $20. Just make sure it outputs enough amperage to power your model Loran. Generally, that's in the range of 650 to 800 milliamps. Now, here's a word of caution. Make sure that you have the connector plug properly wired so the positive and negative voltage is going to the right pins on the Loran. Most likely, the instruction manual that came with your unit will give connector pin numbers, or you can ask your avionics shop. Remember which side of the plug you are wiring, since the leads are reversed if you're working with an opposite side illustration. Now, after a final check with an inexpensive voltmeter, you're ready to power up at home. Now, in this case, I wasn't worried about the antenna, which only would extinguish the warn light and locate my present position. You may want to add that for use in a car or boat. However, all the other features, such as programming the user-defined waypoints, are available. Now, in my recent experience, I spent 2 hours programming the many intersections and outer markers in the areas I normally fly. Another 2 hours provided me time to learn the new trip functions and airport information section. Many Loran manufacturers offer AC adapters as an accessory, but they're usually priced over $100. Here, for just under $25, you're able to take an expensive piece of avionics from your aircraft and use it at home. Consider that I might have taken double the time, or 8 hours, to do the same thing in the air. Now, that's 8 hours of time not spent scanning for traffic, and 8 hours of having your head buried in the cockpit with a new gadget.
The minimum required VFR visibility increases to 5 miles at 10,000 feet, 12,500 feet, or 14,500 feet. The correct answer is 10,000 feet, except airspace below 1,200 AGL.
There was a feeling of unity in the air, and it's a time we don't have now, and it's a time that we haven't had. And I don't know if that time will ever return.
She's just beautiful. If you know how to handle her, she'll do everything you want and more.
I personally had my life saved by this aircraft due to the fact of the type of airplane it is.
It's a beautiful airplane to fly. It's a graceful lady in the air. It's heavy on the controls and very sluggish, but you know, a woman doesn't like to be rushed.
My fondest hope was to ride in this airplane one more time. I don't think there's ever been a B-17 pilot that doesn't have this desire. As soon as they started the engines, just hearing the props, the engines turning over, that came, a flood of memories came back with that.
Okay, clear 3.
And as soon as the airplane was in full, with all the engines going, why, I was back up in the cockpit, sitting there with my hand on the throttle and doing all the procedures, running through the engines and everything, and it was just thrilling.
8, 9, mission's on.
When you're ready to go down that runway, my thoughts always were, what power? You pulled the throttles forward on that thing with all 4 engines going. There's nothing I would trade for that experience. No matter where I was going, that was the ultimate.
There is a mystique that surrounds the B-17. A modern bomber during its time, it was commonly known as the Fortress. It was an aircraft of legendary reputation for taking care of those who flew her. Part of the Fortress legend and mystique is its ability to sustain an almost unbelievable amount of battle damage and still continue to fly.
The construction was such that it could take a great deal of damage. Sections of the wing could be shot away, tail, large holes in the fuselage, just name it. Many times this airplane flew when it should not have flown. It's difficult to say how many lives were saved, but it would be numerous lives were saved because of the airplane damage that it could take.
Today, a restored B-17 can still stir emotions within the hearts of thousands of GIs. These are the men that still remember what this remarkable aircraft did. During the war years, nearly 13,000 B-17s of all models were built. Today, only a handful still fly. German and Japanese pilots soon learned the B-17 wasn't easy to bring down. Although thousands were shot down, rarely was it a simple affair. Not only could the Fortress take a punch, it could deliver one too. From nose to tail, it was laden with bombs and 50 caliber machine guns. During the years of 1942 through 1945, the B-17 was used as America's primary weapon against Germany's industrial power. This was an aircraft that truly changed the course of history. But no longer does the Fortress take to the sky with a load of bombs and a crew of 10 anxious men to face an onslaught of Messerschmitts and Focke-Wulf. Today, many thousands of miles and many thousands of days away from the darkness of World War II, this glistening example of what American air power used to be takes to the peaceful skies.
We have too many engines starting in the spectator area.
This B-17 was on a later model of the 17. It was in the Pacific Theater of Operation, latter part of 44 and 45. We got this airplane in 77 at the Arizona wing, and we restored it to what it is today. We take care of her just like a little baby.
During pre-flight, the control surfaces all have to be checked, not only for movability, but for condition. The fabric's still on, or any cracks, any tearing. So many people come around the airplane during the show that sometimes they can put a finger through the fabric and cause a hole to start. So we have to check it very carefully for movability and for condition.
The main tanks supplying one tank for each engine, except for the inboard engines, and they have 2 tanks, but each one totals 425 gallons. Yeah, the Tokyo tanks in this aircraft are in the outer wing panels, and they hold a conglomerate of each tank, which is actually 5 tanks in one, 270 gallons. So you can multiply 4 times 270 gallons, and that's the capacity of the Tokyo tanks.
The B-17 has a lot of famous firsts attached to it. For one thing, it was built in a one-year period. It was its initial concept was late 1934, and then July 28, 1935, the first B-17 flew. Among the first turbochargers, the first airplane to have a turbocharger. And the turbocharger operates very simply. It takes exhaust air from the cylinders, pumps them through a little wheel, which causes the wheel to spin, which spins a turbine, which supplies pressurized air to the carburetor. Now, the carburetor feeds a Curtiss Wright 1820-97 9-cylinder engine, which powers a Hamilton Standard constant speed propeller. These are the mixture controls controlling the 4 Hamilton Standard constant speed propellers. They also have a control lock located to the right. The throttle lock is located here, a little bit unique in that forward locks all throttles, aft locks only the inborne throttles. The throttles, this is the unique how they move for each individually. A very good design, as a matter of fact. Up here lie the mixture controls. They move from war emergency through auto rich, through auto lean to idle cutoff. The controls for the turbochargers located right here. Cowl flap controls are closed, open, and locked and open. The ignition switches, along with the emergency gang bar that will shut off all 4 engines, located on the left. The entire airplane is overbuilt and with some redundancy. For instance, the elevator controls, the rudder controls are all double cabled in that the rudders have 2 sets of cables running to them. Should one set be shot away, we would still have rudder control. Each elevator has its individual cables. Should an elevator be shot away, we still have the other elevator operating under its own control cable system. The trim tabs are the same way. The B-17 had an autopilot, and an autopilot that could also fly the airplane in formation. And this was done with a formation stick that's not at the moment in Sentimental Journey. But the elevators and ailerons are so heavy in the airplane that it's very, very difficult to fly in formation. The control pressures are so heavy and so ineffective with their 1935 design that when we fly the airplane in air shows, we frequently run the control wheel to its full deflections just to get any rate of turn whatsoever. And this is at the higher speeds. There is no maneuvering speed on the airplane, and that controls can be moved to their stops with no damage whatsoever to the airplane.
Well, takeoff, roll, tail will come up almost automatically if you give it a little forward pressure on the wheel. When I hit 80 knots, that's when we start pulling back and lifting off, and we'll lift off anywhere between 80 and 90 knots. We establish 110 knots as quickly as possible because that's your minimum controllable airspeed with an engine or even two engines out. Unfortunately, on two engines, the airplane will not accelerate at all from that point. So if you're under 110 knots, you literally have to lower that nose to save the airplane, even though you don't want to, it's close to the ground. It's a mandatory situation. One engine, you can keep climbing at 110 knots and probably gain about 500 feet a minute.
These few remaining refurbished war horses are our legacy. Aircraft constructed of simple metal and fabric. But to the men who flew her, they will never forget her. Today, just their presence reminds us of another era, a journey back in time. And perhaps a sentimental journey at that.
We always had this feeling that if you have to do it in any other airplane, do it in a B-17, because that is one that will always get you home.
It's not only flying an airplane, it's flying history, and I think that's what gets me the most. Sitting up there and taking what I call a cheap shot from my standpoint, because I haven't paid my dues, and I feel like about 2 inches high when I'm flying that thing because of all the other men that flew her and gave their lives and went through hell. You know, it's a different world.
Did you know that in many airplanes, the fuel tank selector knob in the cockpit is quite a distance from the valve that actually controls fuel flow? For example, in the Cessna 421, the fuel control valves are out here in the wings, many feet away from the selector knob in the cockpit. Even in this 172, the tank control valve is a good foot away from the cockpit selector knob. So always feel for a detent when you switch tanks. It means the control valve is in a positive position. If you don't feel a detent, don't trust the selector knob. Just because the handle is pointing to the right tank doesn't mean that you're actually feeding from the right tank. The valve could be between tanks. In checking out in a new airplane, take a few minutes to learn the feel of the tank selector detents. Always select the tank to be used for takeoff before you start the engine. Clear? Don't switch tanks during taxi or run-up. Water or sediment might work through the system just as you're lifting off. Some pilots have had the fuel selector handle come off or break while switching tanks in flight. This is when an inexpensive pair of pliers can save the day. And finally, it's a good idea to plan on switching tanks when you're over another airport or suitable landing site. Every year, a number of pilots make forced landings due to tank switching problems, and you don't need to be one of them.
December 11th, 1972. The last man landing on the moon. I'm at the controls, and Jack Schmidt is my co-pilot. It's a rare experience, but in more ways than one. because it's one of the few times I've ever been flying that I didn't have to be concerned about colliding with another aircraft.
Contact. Okay, Houston, the Challenger has landed.
There's a lot more company, and sometimes too much, when I'm flying closer to home.
There's a Piedmont 4 Southwest in Greensburg climbing straight out. Southwest bound out of 5,000, climbing now 19 Alpha over about 2 o'clock.
Okay, 19 Alpha, we're looking. The key up here around a busy airport is awareness, to know where the traffic is. You only got two things to help you. One is those folks on the ground, the other is your own eyes. And if you had something else in a cockpit, some kind of electronic traffic avoidance which can point the airplane out to you, you would know exactly where to look.
Well, that something else is on the way. The Traffic Alert and Collision Avoidance System, or TCAS. A Piedmont 727 like this one has begun testing this anti-collision system during regularly scheduled passenger flights. These aren't battle tanks for Star Wars. They're really simulators in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, where pilots become familiar with TCAS. Basically, TCAS is an onboard radar that locates nearby planes and a computer that tells you when an aircraft is headed your way. 40 seconds before a potential impact, a yellow light flashes on the instrument panel, accompanied by an audio warning.
Traffic.
The pilot then gets a picture on his radar scope. The yellow triangle depicts the other aircraft. The number plus 15 beside it indicates the intruder is 1,500 feet above us, but the vertical indicator shows that it is descending. When the intruder is within 25 seconds, the triangle turns to a more dangerous red.
Climb. Climb.
TCAS now calls out an evasive command, reinforced by a green arrow on a rate of climb indicator.
Maneuver your aircraft. It's telling you to climb.
Okay, and I'm climbing now.
In this exercise, as a pilot climbs, we see the other plane pass almost directly below us, but at a safe distance, thanks to TCAS. Soon, TCAS systems will be required on all commercial airliners.
We will propose a rule later this year, which we must do in the administrative process. We'll have a full rule next year mandating the use of TCAS. And by the end of this decade, 1980s, most of the airplanes in the system, the airplanes will have TCAS. And by 1992, we will have completed the installation of TCAS. TCAS in itself will be expensive initially. It's going to cost on the order of $60,000 to $80,000 for each TCAS unit. It's not going to be available for general aviation aircraft for some time.
Of course, even TCAS isn't a 100% guarantee against a mid-air collision. For one thing, it won't pick up signals from other aircraft unless they have a radar-reflecting transponder. But fortunately, now all aircraft in congested areas are required to have such transponders.
If you run into something up there, you just can't pull off the side of the road, call for help. So it's very important to know where all that traffic is around you. And that's why the collision avoidance system is such a breakthrough for aviation safety. It's going to make flying a lot more comfortable for all of us.
To fly IFR, your aircraft's pitot-static system must have been tested and approved within the preceding 6 calendar months, 12 calendar months, or 24 calendar months. The correct answer is 24 calendar months.
The Lancair 235 is a kit-built airplane designed to realize the greatest possible speed from the least amount of horsepower. Normally, 1 horsepower per mile per hour is considered good efficiency among production airplanes. The Lancair surpasses 200 miles per hour on just 118 horsepower. Hi, I'm Dave Jackson, pilot and one of the producers of ABC's Wide World of Flying. And this is the remarkable Lancair 235. You know, even among home builds, the Lancair is considered an unusual machine, not only because of its speed, efficiency, and its obvious good looks, but because it just may be the first of a new generation of truly easy-to-assemble composite home builds. We're here at Santa Paula, California, home of Lance Neibauer, the designer of the Lancair. And perhaps it's appropriate that Neibauer's company, Nyco Aviation, should be based here, since Santa Paula is a popular haven for both classic and home-built airplanes in Southern California. Neubauer's Lancair has become a tremendous success. In only a year and a half, Nyco Aviation has sold over 200 kits, making the Lancair design the most popular since the Christen Eagle. Lance, I understand you didn't start out to be a home-built designer. How'd you get started designing airplanes?
No, I didn't. My background is that of an artist and a designer. I like to think the artistry shows a little bit in the Lancair. The aerodynamics has been a thing I've been studying on my own for quite a few years now. I do have a background, a family background in aviation. That's my uncle was involved with Al Myers, and they brought the Myers 200. It became reality through their work and effort. My dad was involved with Stinson, and so I grew up around airplanes, but not directly involved in it. But I had a love for flying ever since that first ride in the Myers 200. That really set the hook. I looked at production airplanes when I was ready to buy something. That's probably what set the seeds in motion here, but I couldn't find anything in the production line that I was comfortable with, either for performance versus speed primarily, versus cost. So I turned right away to something that was at that time new to me, and that was the home-built movement. The number one was performance on minimal horsepower. I wanted to go fast with as little power as would do it. The other thing was cockpit comfort. I wanted to get a lot of comfort out of the cockpit and yet keep the wetted area of the airframe down. And that's a difficult thing to do usually, and that's where I saw I had a lot of advantages, particularly with composites. Composites, I think, are the future because they don't rot, they don't rust, they don't corrode, they don't fatigue. The only thing they're susceptible to is temperature. And composites to this date have used all room temperature systems, and that has some inherent problems on a hot day in Mojave, for example. Skin temperatures can get up to the point where you reach the T sub G of the material, which is a glass transition temperature. The high temperature materials, and all of ours, are done in ovens under pressure, 250 degree cure cycles. They're stable to 250 degrees, and it makes a big, big difference in the longevity of the part. We did go to the Lycoming 0235, typically 118 horse. With that, over the Continental 100 horse, we see about 15 miles an hour more and perhaps 300 feet per minute climb increase. The 235 will top out at 225, cruises at 210. And we've demonstrated that in several races, and I think the skeptics are believers now.
One of the differences between this and some other home builds is that the Lancair has the same horizontal cabin dimension as a Bonanza. Though it's definitely a snug little airplane that you put on rather than climb into, the cockpit is fairly comfortable. Neubauer limited seat recline to 22 degrees rather than the 40 to 45 degrees used in some other composite home builds. So the seat backs in a Lancair feel more like a sports car's than a home build's. The panel on the Lancair 235 is equally sporty and compact, but it's not cramped. I'm sure you'll notice that on the left side, Lance has installed 2 simulated gyros for demonstration purposes only.
As you can see, I chose control sticks versus control wheels. I think that's because anybody that flies a stick plane versus a wheel plane will agree it's a more natural feeling holding a stick for something that's moving 3 dimensions rather than a wheel.
With only 118 horsepower out front, the Lancair doesn't exactly burn up the asphalt, but stall speed is a fairly low 55 miles per hour, so the airplane doesn't need a lot of runway. Once we got the Lancair airborne, cleaned up, and accelerated to best rate of climb speed of 124 miles per hour, the VSI settled on about 1,250 feet per minute.
The landing gear is electric hydraulic. That's for simplicity. Flip a switch and the gear goes up in 6.5 seconds. Open a dump valve and the gear comes down and locks automatically. The flaps are electric. Again, that's simplicity. I also incorporated a 10-degree flap reflex, trailing edge up for improved cruise performance. Control response is sensitive, yet stable. That's the best way to put it, probably. The plane will fly hands-off very well, yet it's not a heavy-fisted airplane. It's a 3-finger airplane. You fly with 2 fingers and a thumb, and you think your turns, and you've done them. Yet if you let go of the stick, it'll trim out and fly hands off very nicely. The plane is set up now for what I would consider relatively deluxe VFR flying. We get asked often whether or not it can be outfitted for IFR, and yes it can, very easy to do. Speed wasn't my only goal in Lancair, but it was one of the major ones. I wanted an airplane that would be efficient in all respects, not just cruise. And with the L235 engine, I can see 210 miles per hour every day as a cruise, and yet we're doing it on about 6.5 gallons per hour. And I think that's real good efficiency. In automotive terms, that's about 30 miles per gallon.
Maneuverability is another area where the Lancair shines. Roll rate is over 115 degrees per second, so a full aileron roll requires only about 3 seconds. Elevator response is also super quick, almost too quick in fact. At cruise speed, the elevator is so light it seems to move practically by thought. 60-degree banks are a mere flick of the wrist away. In short, flying this airplane is a ball.
It was a very stable airplane, it trimmed beautifully, but at the same time with its rapid roll rate and its ability to turn quickly, it's a fun airplane to fly.
It's just a real thrill to flying the thing, the way it handles, and so it flies smooth and everything about it, just like it.
You want to land on other than big runways, and landing in small airports, sometimes you can't do it with a high-performance aircraft. This one you could get into big ones and small ones and get there in a hurry.
If control response is exciting, stalls are anything but. Gear and flap extension produce very little pitch change, and the airplane feels very stable as speed is reduced. The Lancair doesn't do much at the brake except pitch down, straight ahead. Recovery is simply a matter of releasing back pressure and letting the airplane fly itself out of the stall. In the pattern, the Lancair behaves like a miniature Mooney, but with far better control response. The NLF airfoil retains plenty of lift for flare and generally has no surprises for any pilot checked out in a high-performance retractable. Despite the airplane's slippery looks, it's a docile machine around the patch. Lance, that's about as much fun as I've ever had in an airplane. I can see why they're so popular.
Yeah, I think the home-built movement has offered some truly spectacular flying. Our builders program, in which the customer can come in and work in our shop, has also been a great benefit for them because they get expert guidance from us.
I'm over here perhaps once a week, which is a big advantage. And, you know, anything we wanted has been supplied, either information or materials.
One of the great things about the kit itself has been the support from the factory. And by that I mean that when we've needed a component or we've needed additional instructions, we can call down here one day and virtually receive whatever we need UPS the next day.
Composite construction is the easiest construction you could do in my terms, and it's so easy that you could teach somebody in a half hour and they could build the whole airplane and virtually build it with a paintbrush. Since composite is glue, everything is glued together.
We've had a few minor problems with maybe the manual not being as complete or as well diagrammed as we could have used. This is the first aircraft I've ever tried to build. The manual has since been rewritten and improved. The pre-molded parts, though, have been an absolute joy to work with. They align the way they're supposed to, they're easy to work with, easy to shape.
Oh, I'm perhaps 30%, optimistically 30% into the thing now. The gear is in, the hydraulics are not fitted, but they're all in position. The problems have mostly been getting used to working with fiberglass.
I bought the first plane, and Lance, the first one to the public. Lance was building the very first one, and I got parts shortly thereafter, before he started drawing plans or writing a book or anything else. So I'd go over there in the evenings and crawl underneath his airplane or all over it, take measurements, draw little sketches and diagrams, and he'd give me some of his notes, and I'd go home and work on my airplane.
A Lancair 235 kit costs just slightly under $16,000, Add another $10,000 for engine, prop, and avionics, and you'll spend just about $26,000 for a completed airplane. The kit does, however, include a pretty complete package of materials and prefabricated components. Remember, though, you still have to build the airplane. NICO says construction time should take about 1,000 hours if you're doing everything right. In simpler terms, this means if you work 10 hours a week, you'd spend about 100 weeks building a Lancair. In contrast, for about the same amount of money, you could buy an older Mooney, a Comanche, or a Cardinal RG. You wouldn't get anywhere near the performance of a Lancair 235, but on the other hand, you could fly one of these away the same day you handed over the cashier's check. But that's not what home builds are really all about. A man who builds his own airplane may very well be looking for economy, but he's also the kind of pilot who enjoys the satisfaction of knowing that he built the plane himself. And if the plane is a Lancair, the ultimate fun is in flying it.
We hope you've enjoyed ABC's Wide World of Flying. This is the important first edition for those of you with a personal library. You know, many of us use our airplanes for that famous $100 hamburger. But besides lunch or dinner, we often fly off for weekend retreats or full vacations. Wide World of Flying would like those of you who own camcorders to share your favorite places with us in a Video Letters to the Editor segment planned for upcoming issues. You know, oftentimes subscribers to AOPA's Pilot send in their favorite places in a column called the Travel Directory. We'd like to do a similar column, but with home video. To illustrate, here are some examples, like flying into Treasure Key, one of the islands close to the Florida coast in the Bahamas. The classified sections of the flying magazines describe marina condos available for rent. And here's what they look like. Or here's a great wintertime flight for lunch or dinner into North Philadelphia Airport, where you can taxi right up to a 94th Aero Squadron restaurant. Perhaps you've flown a rented plane around Hawaii and would like to share that video with others. Let us know what video you may have or are planning to shoot, and we'll coordinate the items for each issue. Do not send the actual videotape, but merely a short description by letter or postcard, and we'll contact you for the tape. Now be sure to include your daytime and evening telephone numbers. Address the mail to Wide World of Flying, care of Peregrine Productions, 6910 Havenhurst Avenue, Suite 106, Van Nuys, California, 91406. Once again, no videos on your initial mailing. Video Letters to the Editor, an exclusive feature of ABC's Wide World of Flying.
Video issue number 2 of Wide World of Flying is ready for shipment to fully paid subscribers. In video issue 2, you'll get a left seat checkout in Mooney's turbocharged intercooled 252.
Here in the wing fuselage join area, the wings are ready to be mated to the fuselage and the airplane ready to come off its dolly and onto its own main gear. When the basic fuselage is complete, it's maneuvered into position above the spar carry-through, lowered onto the wing structure, and bolted into place.
The outside air temperature up here at 27,000 feet is minus 20 degrees centigrade. But in fact, our intercooler, which is essentially an air radiator, makes all the difference at this height.
You'll visit Oshkosh 87 for a behind-the-scene look at air traffic control.
Last year, we exceeded 65,000 operations for the entire convention, and our busiest day was 12,300, which exceeds the normal operation of O'Hare, which is 3,150. So we're well above the world's busiest airport for the convention.
Stay in line, single file up the tracks, 1,800 feet, 110 miles an hour. We'll give you a sequence when you're directly over Fisk.
So what they've come up with is what we call the Fisk arrival procedure. And what it consists of is there's a railroad track that runs from Oshkosh Airport southwestbound. Real easy to follow.
You'll visit AOPA headquarters in Frederick, Maryland. You'll see an important safety tip on detecting stuck valves.
This engine is actually missing on one of its cylinders.
You'll get a peek at Porsche's new aircraft engine with single control operation. You'll see our first viewer home video.
And then once it's received, there's no time charges incurred in scrolling through it on a
And you'll see a new highly graphic weather service from Pan Am.
Tuning the particular area that you want to look at, or zoom in to read the fine detail.
In Video Issue 2, you'll get a first look at the new Argus 5000 moving map display, which can be connected to the vast majority of Lorans being sold today.
On the display. The turn to base and final were all accurately depicted.
Which now shoves the...
And finally, in the first part of a two-part series, you'll begin a detailed checkout in a brand new Learjet 35A.
You'll recall during the pre-flight, I indicated that when we get to within 7% of stall, we'll get a stick shaker and the yoke will nudge forward. Then when we get to within 1 knot, the yoke is shoved forward just like that.
Video Issue 2 is ready for shipment right now, but only to fully paid subscribers. If you've not yet paid the subscription invoice attached to the mailer containing this tape, we urge you to do so right away, while it's on your mind. You may use either check or major credit card. If you have already paid, we thank you. And be checking your mailbox, because Issue 2 is on its way.
Now, stay with us for that section that I talked about earlier. Wide World of Flying's Bonus Buyer's Guide. It's a video showcase that allows suppliers to really show you the benefits of their company or products to help you make intelligent buying decisions. Until our next quarterly video issue, safe flying to you all.
Hello, fellow pilots. I'm John King of King Schools. I'm going to share a tip with you from our VFR Updater course about sectional charts that just could make your flying a whole lot safer.
And I'm Martha King. I'm going to share a tip from our IFR Updater course that should help you make safer, more stabilized descents from non-precision approaches.
Most of us have noticed gray lines like these crisscrossing the sectional chart. This happens to be the Los Angeles sectional, and we're looking at the area just north of the Salton Sea. Now, these gray lines represent military training routes. On these routes, the military conducts training at speeds sometimes in excess of 250 knots, often at altitudes as low as 200 feet above ground level. Now, notice the labels on these routes. If the route designation begins with the letters VR, then the military training must be conducted in VFR conditions. If, on the other hand, the designation begins with the letters IR, then the training can be in any kind of weather. I think of the numbering system as being like a pyramid with the larger 4-digit numbers at the bottom and the smaller 3-digit numbers at the top. If the designation number is a 4-digit number, then the training must be conducted at 1,500 feet above ground level or below. If the number is a 3-digit number, the training can be at any altitude. Having this information stored in your mind will help you avoid a close encounter of this scary kind with a low-flying, high-speed military jet.
On a non-precision approach, one without a glide slope, an early descent from your minimum descent altitude after reaching visual conditions could land you in the trees, particularly at night or in low visibility. On many approach charts, a visual descent point has been added. Waiting until you reach this VDP before you start your descent from your minimum descent altitude guarantees you obstruction clearance and normally gives you the same 3-degree angle of descent as a standard ILS glide slope. The VDP is shown by a heavy V in the profile view as on this VOR approach to Elkhart, Indiana. It is usually identified as here by a DME reading. Use of the VDP is optional. But if your aircraft has the navigation equipment to identify the visual descent point, the FAA strongly recommends that you do wait until reaching the VDP before starting your descent. Using the VDP should help you stay out of those trees.
Whether you want to get up to date for a biennial flight review, pass a written test, or prepare for a check ride, it's all guaranteed. King Video Ground School trains you to understand the big picture by taking you on location in the cockpit, in the weather, or in the tower. Monster graphics make difficult problems fall into place with ease. Private Pilot magazine says the student who follows John King's lecture, graphics, and numerous sample problems will have an excellent understanding of the subject. Plane and Pilot News says our evaluation panel found the King Accelerated Ground School tapes, in their opinion, to be the best offered. Here's what students say.
This is Patty Wagstaff in her Pitts S1 Special.
I've taken 2 King Ground School courses. My sister's taken a couple, and my husband's taken probably 3 or 4. And every one of them has been really successful and really fantastic. And we've all done great on them too. We've gotten really high scores and can attribute it all to John and Martha, to King Accelerated Ground Schools.
Hi, my name is Rick Gillette. I used the King Home Video course to obtain a 96 on my instrument instructor written exam. Couldn't have done it without King.
I took the King Private Ground School course. I thought it was a very concise and thorough course, and it gave me everything I needed to pass the FAA written with a score of 88.
It raised my level of competency quite a bit. I did get a 92 on my private test, and I got a 98 on my IFR test, and I feel really, really proud.
And I find that they're very easy to follow, and being able to rewind them and review makes it even more easy.
King VFR and IFR Updater courses are a great way to prepare for a biennial flight review or just get current again. Each is $99 for 4 hours of informative video. King written exam courses include at least 5 2-hour videotapes, a course book, 3 practice exams with answers and detailed explanations, plus your exam sign-off. Exam courses for only $199 are Instrument, Commercial, Flight Instructor, Instrument Instructor, ATP, and Flight Engineer. The private course is only $149. King Flight Test courses show you how to ace your private, commercial, or IFR flight test. An actual FAA examiner tells what he expects of you, and your instructor shows you how to demonstrate your knowledge on the ground and in the air. Each course includes the Practical Test Standards booklet and 2 videotapes for only $89. For same-day shipping, call 800-854-1001. You'll have a 20-day free trial, and if you fail your test, you keep the course and get your money back. Order within 30 days and mention ABC's Wide World of Flying, and we'll give you a bonus for promptness. The King Takeoff Course Album, a $60 value. Your bonus includes audio cassettes on mountain flying, weather flying, flying the high-flying recips, and frightened spouses. To get your bonus for promptness and your King course, call 800-854-1001 now.
Century, now. The industry is changing, returning to one basic design. Jet propulsion. Piper has it, not just for today, but for years to come.
A pace setter. An innovator. Always pushing. Piper. Searching for the ultimate solution. By pushing the limits of proven technology, building one innovation upon another, Piper has consistently delivered breakthroughs that have shaped general aviation history. What set Piper apart from the very beginning was that it was founded by a businessman, not a barnstormer. W.T. Piper established a systematic process of innovation in an industry of dreamers. He urged his engineers to seek the practical answers to technical challenges, establishing a tradition of producing extraordinary achievements with elegantly simple solutions. Piper created the general aviation industry with the introduction of the Piper Cub. The Cub was Piper's response to a need for a light, reliable, sturdy airplane for the private market. Aviation's answer to the Model T. It identified the best of proven technology, refined it, expanded it to new limits, and then packaged it in a way that best suited the consumer's needs. The Cub stayed in production well into the 80s and is still one of the best-known aircraft in the skies today. A living legacy of Piper's commitment to products that endure. In the 50 years since the introduction of the Cub, Piper has continued to apply its formula for innovation with remarkable success. In breakthroughs like the Apache, the all-metal twin-engine Apache was the first light corporate plane that gave smaller businesses the freedom to fly when and where they chose. Built with uncompromising structural integrity, the Apache and its sister Aztec dominated the light corporate market for over 2 decades. And it's favored today for a variety of business-related services. The Navajo series soon followed and continues to be one of the favorite twin-engine cabin-class aircraft for both corporate and charter use. As the need for lighter corporate aircraft emerged, the market was also demanding modern personal aircraft with more room and performance. Piper responded by producing a new generation of fast 4- and 6-place singles, the Piper Comanche series. The sleek Comanche featured many new innovations in light planes, including a movable tailplane and a swept tail fin, both of which were being used by U.S. Air Force fighters and by commercial jets. This new design for light aircraft delivered unprecedented performance. In the 50s and 60s, Max Conrad set records in both single and twin-engine Comanches that still stand today. His single-engine record, Casablanca to Los Angeles non-stop in 72 hours, and his non-stop twin-engine flight from Cape Town, South Africa to St. Petersburg, Florida, further confirmed Piper's reputation for rugged, dependable aircraft. Within a few years, Piper once again took general aviation a leap further in the Cherokee, creating a complete family of light aircraft that would remain worldwide bestsellers for decades to come. This derivative design gave consumers a selection of similarly styled aircraft that offered a variety of features and benefits to suit the individual needs of owners and pilots. Building on decades of experience, Piper continues to produce products that are well thought out and designed to meet consumer needs in the most efficient way. Searching, pushing, Piper is still setting the pace for the industry, breaking new ground in both single and multi-engine aircraft technology. Today, the Piper Malibu is the most versatile single-engine aircraft in the world, offering pressurized comfort to a new type of demanding aviator. Providing a 250 miles per hour cruise speed on 16 gallons of fuel per hour in true cabin class style, the Malibu is causing many single owners to move up and many twin owners to move over. And by any measurement, the Cheyenne 3A and 400 LS offer today's corporate executives advantages that no other aircraft can provide. Fan jet speed and altitude with the flexibility and performance of a prop jet.
The Cheyenne 400 LS is a tool that has made it real easy to set over 40 aviation speed records. With this airplane's ability to legally operate off short runways, its exceptional single-engine climb performance, and the near-jet speeds at cruise, and its new luxurious cabin, the 400 LS is the ultimate solution for any company whose trip legs are most often 1,000 nautical miles or less. The Cheyenne 400 LS is just one more example of how Piper has been meeting real transportation needs for over 50 years.
Piper's clear superiority has convinced demanding organizations like Lufthansa Airlines and the U.S. Customs Service to choose Piper aircraft for key operations. Piper's performance and a reputation for remarkable structural and systems integrity continues to fuel a steady demand for its products. Today, Piper is the only manufacturer producing a full line of aircraft. Warrior 2, Archer 2, Dakota, Turbo Aero 4, Malibu, Saratoga, Saratoga SP, Turbo Saratoga SP, Seneca 3, Cheyenne 3A, Cheyenne 400 LS. Aircraft built in Piper's 50-year tradition. Aircraft designed to meet a specific market need, to set the pace, not just for today, but for years to come. Piper, the ultimate solution.
We thought our charter member subscribers would like to see a short promotional tape that has been put together on our unique video magazine, Wide World of Flying. In just a little over 3 minutes, it previews the editorial content, scope, and features that are under development for future issues.
Flying, it's your world. Exciting, challenging, and fun. Flying demands your best. It is unforgiving of carelessness, ignorance, or neglect. But for those who truly love flying, its rewards are unmatched by any other endeavor. Now, for those of you who love to fly, comes an all-new video aviation magazine. ABC's Wide World of Flying, produced by pilots, just for pilots. Wide World of Flying is a 1-hour video cassette magazine, produced to the broadcast quality standards that you would expect from ABC. Wide World of Flying is written by some of the same aviation experts whose words you read in leading print magazines. But Wide World of Flying actually puts you in the pilot's seat to fly the great airplanes of today and tomorrow, to learn tips and techniques from the pros, and to meet pilots and examine aircraft from all over the world. As a subscriber, you'll receive a Wide World of Flying video cassette 4 times each year, mailed prepaid right to your home or office. Each issue will explore a wide range of topics. For example, from piston singles to turbojets, we'll put you in the left seat of interesting and exciting airplanes. Our goal is to give you a wide range of piloting experiences and knowledge. Wide World of Flying will help you fine-tune your aeronautical know-how with some of the nation's best CFIs. The emphasis is on practical knowledge you can put to use immediately. Come meet the designers and examine the prototype aircraft of the future. See how composites, computers, and new engine designs will change the way we fly. Looking to improve the panel or performance of your airplane? We'll show you the latest in electronics, instruments, and aircraft mods, how they work, and how owners like them. Climb into the pilot's seat of some of the most interesting of today's kit-built airplanes and helicopters. We'll take you to the factory and examine both construction and performance. Come and fly some of the great airplanes from our aviation heritage. If you love flying, you'll love our close-ups on these great old birds. Instrument flying is serious business. We'll bring you tips and techniques to improve your weather know-how and IFR skills. We'll be bringing you the whole exciting Wide World of Flying, general aviation, soaring, blimps, aerobatics, military operations, and yet most important, we'll help you be a better, more proficient pilot. Enjoy the world of aviation on your own VCR. Enjoy flying as you never have before. Enjoy ABC's Wide World of Flying.
If you've just watched our premiere video issue of Wide World of Flying and are not a subscriber, you can begin building your own personal collection today. A one-year subscription, 4 quarterly issues is just $99.95. You know, that's less than $25 a tape. And if you act now, we have a limited number of Voyager tapes available to you free with your one-year subscription. This special tape, not available for sale, features ABC News coverage of the Voyager flight. You'll see the takeoff, landing, and an exclusive Nightline interview with the crew, all included in this exciting 85-minute video, yours free by subscribing now. Just call our toll-free order number, 1-800-247-5470. $99.95 gets you 4 quarterly issues and the free Voyager tape. That's 5 tapes in all for under $100. Probably one of the best buys in aviation videos today. The number to call again is 1-800-247-5470. And we will accept Visa or MasterCard billing.